How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. No idea what to call this, what it is yet. This is the first one of these that we've done. Been here along with my friend Michael. I don't know where, I don't use Zoom very much. I don't know which side of me you're on. We thought a good topic to start this would be the five most underrated albums we don't feel have gotten near enough attention. And we each pick five, and I guess we'll alternate. So did you want to go first, or shall
No,
I?
you brought it in. You may as well lead it off.
All righty. So my first pick, an album I may have mentioned to you, and I actually have it handy here. This is Starcastle's debut album. Starcastle's a 70s here. Get you an idea from the look at that hair, man.
It looks like Lemmy with sunglasses.
It's some fantastic hair they've got. So prog is all hell. So if you don't like prog, they're not the one that's going to convert you. But I do think they do prog extremely well. I believe Terry Luttrell, formerly of REO Speedwagon, was the first singer of this band. They only had a couple records, short run in the late 70s. But I love this record, man. It's just bright, it's complex, it's fun. The production is just okay, but the music sounds great. The playing is tight, very skillful. The compositions are fantastic. Lady of the Lake is the big track off it, the only one that casual prog people would probably know from this band. It's about 12 minutes long, and it's fantastic. I think they do prog as well as anybody. The biggest criticism you'll hear about Starcastle is that they're just a Yes clone, and the Yes influence is clearly there. I mean, they sound a lot like Yes, but they go their own way, and they do it really well. And I think if you want to listen to a Starcastle record, give this one a shot, because if you heard this one, you've heard them all, and there are only like three or four. So that's my first pick.
All right, so for me, it is Monster by R.E.M., which is right in the middle of their 1990s discography. So it's not automatic for the people good. It's not murmur good, but it's a product of its time. It's very distortion heavy, and it's a fun listen. It doesn't get a lot of love because it doesn't sound like R.E.M. It's very distorted. You start off with What's the Frequency, Kenneth. You go into things like Bang and Blame and King of Comedy which is the vocals are just so crunchy. And then you also have Let Me In, which is Michael Stipe, like a letter to Kurt Cobain, because he knew Kurt was struggling quite a bit. So it's one of those, it's an R.E.M. record. It is not one of their greatest, but it's definitely not one of their worst. It's right in the middle, maybe up to close to the upper tier, closer to that. But that's what I went with my number five.
Do you know what year was that? Do you know?
1994, I believe.
So Kurt was still alive.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I believe so.
I didn't know they knew each other. I forget what year he died, but
he died in 94. So it was right around then.
I'm going to go a bit out of order here and keep it 90s since we brought up the 90s. This is Third Eye Blind's debut album from 1997, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. Late 90s, I can't remember. Kurt would have been dead by this point, so there's your reference there. I'm pretty damn sure. This album's fantastic. I mean, Semi-Charmed Life was the big hit. It's the one everybody knows. It still gets a lot of radio play and is in a lot of those like best of the 90s playlists and stuff. But the whole album, top to bottom, there is not a bad track on it, and it's a good album. It's a double album. Narcolepsy comes to mind. Motorcycle Drive-By, God of Wine. There's just so many great. What's the one? How's It Gonna Be? Is on there as well. That was the other one that got a lot of radio play. I feel like there was one more that I'm forgetting right now. It's a bit of the slower one, but this Step Back from That Ledge, my friend. Whatever that song was.
Oh, Jumper. Yeah,
Jumper. Thank you. Yeah, that was on the A side of the first record as well. I know that it's not like unknown. People know this record and they like it and people have fond memories of it, but this needs to be in more great albums of the 90s conversations. I mean, never mind this one. I'm talking like those two could make a run in my mind for the greatest album of the 90s, the most emblematic of what was going on, all that was great in music in the 90s. And the production, oh man, I don't want to, I believe this is a Rick Rubin project, which isn't surprising because he was absolutely everywhere in the 90s, but the production is fantastic, top to bottom, mixed perfectly. And I think you might concur with me on this, but these guys knew how to end a song. There was no fades.
They did.
They knew how to end the song. All the songs have strong endings. And I feel like this album doesn't get near enough attention.
All right. So for my number four, I went with Red Hot Chili Peppers 2006 double album, Stadium Arcadium. I went through and I looked at, what albums came up on lists like this of the underrated. And I noticed that Stadium Arcadium gets a lot of hate because it's a double album and it's like post that Blood Sugar Sex Magic and Californication and By the Way era. So people don't seem to shit on this quite a bit. And it's got the singles are okay. You got Danny California, Snow Heyo, and Tell Me Baby are all quality tracks, but the deep tracks on this thing on over the course of all the songs on both albums are both really good. You have Hey, Death of the Martian, you have Ready Made, which is a banger. I mean, the only skip song I have on this every single time is Hump to Bump because it's like it's one of those classic Red Hot Chili Peppers funk tunes that I don't really care for.
Yeah.
But for being a double album, it really is a tight project. Is it the most groundbreaking thing of all time? Absolutely not. But is it a bad record? By no means at all is it a bad record. It is very tightly made. The production's solid. I dig it. I dig all of it front to back pretty much entirely.
Yeah. The one thing the Red Hot Chili Peppers could always do that the critics didn't really get was they just made fun music, man.
They did.
It's fun.
It's a fun record to listen to. It's an easy record to listen to.
The energy is always there.
The energy is definitely there. It's not groundbreaking, but I like it.
Yeah, that's all you really need, man. I think I'll go out of order again here because these guys, this next band, where did I put that? I don't have this one on vinyl, I'm sorry to say, but I do have it on cassette.
Nice.
That's Big Head Todd and the Monsters, Sister Sweetly from 93 or 94, around that time, about the same time as your R.E.M. album that you plugged there. And I just noticed this actually looking at it. Look how bad the font mismatch is there on the top.
Yeah, it's weird. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll take a point off for the album art, which I always thought was bad, but that font thing, I don't know if they're all like that or it's just a cassette. These guys are like a sort of flash in the pan 90s act, even though they started in like the mid 80s, I think, and kept going all through the 2000s and all that stuff, releasing albums that didn't get a whole lot of sales. This was the only one that charted big for them. Broken Hearted Savior, Bittersweet, those are the two kind of lead singles and probably the two best songs on it, which is rare. But the deep cuts are awesome, man. They were very much a bar band, jam band, Fish kind of thing that they had going on, but they did it fantastic. And this guy's voice, I don't know his name, I should have looked it up before we started, but this guy's voice is fantastic. He's just an excellent singer. He can do high, he can do low, loud, soft. He brings a whole instrumental dynamic to just his voice in these tunes. And I think this one needs some more attention because unlike the Third Eye Blind, which people talk about, nobody's talking about Big Head Todd and the Monsters.
No,
but they should.
I've
man.
never heard of Big Head Todd and the Monsters.
It's a fantastic, just jammy 90s, and it shows its age at times. I forget the tune, but there's one tune on there when you hear it and you're like, okay, this is a little dated. This sounds real dated. Oh, and also in keeping with so many other 90s records, they had the obligatory acoustic ballad thrown in there, and it's the worst song on the record, and they end the record on it, Brother John. I don't know, I think it's called Brother John. I don't know why the hell they did that, but that's my pick. I think that people need to talk about that record a little bit more. It's really good.
I love the obligatory ballad if it works. So like Black on 10 is a great example of that working. But yeah, more often than not, the ballad song in the middle of the 90s record is terrible.
And that's another thing to appreciate about Third Eye Blinds is they did not give in to the pressure that people were probably telling them, oh yeah, you got to have a slow cut on there. They had 2 or 3, but they did it on their own terms and they were good.
Right. All right. So for my next pick, I mean, it's Renegades by Rage Against the Machine. I felt like this is a well-known record. It's one I think at least people who know Rage know about because they only released 4 studio albums. Mm-hmm. But the thing about this one is that it's entirely comprised of covers. So it's the redheaded stepchild of the quartet of Rage records, which you have their self-titled Evil Empire and Battle Los Angeles. And then this one, to me, this one, it's just as good as the other ones. They go just as hard with all their covers. They make all of them their own. They get to wear their influences on their sleeves. The highlights are Ghost of Tom Joad and Maggie's Farm in my mind, which the way you take a Bob Dylan song and make it as aggressive and raw and crazy as they do, it speaks to their musicianship. Like, I wish Rage Against the Machine would have made more after 2000, after this record, and they never did. But going out on this is not, it's not a low point by any means. This is a very, very strong record that outside of Renegades of Funk, nobody ever talks about.
Yeah, that's honestly, I hadn't heard this album, and that's the one that I knew that was off of it. But how bold would you be? Would you rank it above any of the other studio projects?
I might rank it above Battle Los Angeles. So the way I rank them is, in my mind, I go the self-titled, Evil Empire, and then I go back and forth between this one and Battle Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I almost put Evil Empire on here because I always feel like that's the one with the least amount of hits on it, the least amount of well-known songs on it.
Yeah,
Outside of Down Rodeo and Bulls on Parade, nobody knows any of the other songs on it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I knew I wanted to put a Rage album on here because I felt like there was at least one that's unsung, and this just seemed to be the obvious pick.
I would say to your point, but I would say in the larger scheme of popular music, they're probably a bit underrated even still. I know they're well known,
Oh, I would agree.
but their influence is massive. Everybody that came
Oh,
after
yeah.
Rage knew Rage and was influenced hugely by them.
And they did rap metal well. Like it was so shitty and terrible. After, like in the early 2000s
Oh
and
yeah,
late 90s, Rage was so good at doing rap metal and making it sound interesting and making the musicianship so entertaining and excellent. I love Rage. They're a great band.
so this is going to be a radical departure in style and heaviness. But my
Okay.
next pick, I'm sure you've heard me proselytize these guys all the time. Sons of
Of
Kemet.
course.
This is 2018's Your Queen is a Reptile, their second studio album, I believe. Their first one really didn't get a very wide release at all. I wasn't really aware of it. But man, this is some of the coolest, most forward thinking, world influenced experimental jazz. I guess you could call it a concept album. I mean, all the tracks have that Your Queen is a whoever, usually like a female civil rights leader or whatever. So it's kind of a concept album, very political. But the real highlight is not the politics. It's not even the concept. It's just the skill of the playing of the band. Shabaka, or I think it's Shabaka Hutchings is the name of the saxophonist and sort of de facto band leader. And he's fantastic. I mean, his ability to just create these spiraling polyrhythmic jazz compositions that just they capture your attention in a way that jazz seldom does, especially more modern jazz. And I think even though again this album is being talked about mainly in jazz circles, and I think Fantano had it up pretty on his channel and gave it a great rating and all that stuff. But man, people need to be talking about this. This is amazing, and these guys are so young and they're early on in their career. I can't wait to see what else they do. I think they're extremely underrated.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to go completely the opposite direction. I'm going to go far away from that, and I'm going to go back to the 1970s. I'm going to go with Neil Young's. I want to make sure I get the year right. 1974 record, On the Beach, which
Hmm.
is right smushed between After the Gold Rush and Harvest, and then Tonight's the Night on the other end of it. And this one kind of gets, forgotten about because outside of maybe Walk On and For the Turnstiles, nobody really knows this record. And the deep cuts on it are excellent. The deep cuts on it, you have Vampire Blues, which is about the oil industry. You have Ambulance Blues, which closes it out, which is about a 10, 11-minute ballad about just growing older and taking shots of Richard Nixon and hating fame. And that's what this album is really about. It's about him hating being famous because it's right after he blew up. It's a largely acoustic record. And it's some of my favorite Neil Young work in terms of an individual album. I hadn't heard it until the last 6 months or so, last year. And I'm sorry I hadn't because a lot of the tracks on this stuck out to me. Anything with that ends in blues, because there are 3 tracks that end in blues, are all excellent. All the songs on this are really excellent.
That's I haven't heard this record. I'm sorry to say, and when you put it in context like that, I damn well should have, because After the Gold Rush and Harvest are my 2 favorite Young projects, and this one you said was right in between, right?
Right after, yep.
Oh, man, he was on fire in that period, creatively, lyrically. His politics have gotten a little stale in the last 20 years or so because
Yeah.
he keeps pushing them. But man, he's such a believable
Look, you can bitch
songwriter.
and moan about Richard Nixon for so long. So, I mean,
Right, that's a great pick, man. I haven't heard that album. I might have to go listen to that as soon as we're done here because I'm very curious. I love that era of Neil Young's work. So not quite going back as far as you, but we are going to go to the 80s, and I have this one handy too. This is
nice.
Yes's. I think 80. What did I say? 83, 84. I can't remember. It's early 80s. This is Yes. This is their radical departure from what they had been previously, the 60s, 70s prog sound that they epitomized. Totally gone here. It's electronic. It's produced. It's like just crafted in these meticulous sort of synthy 80s sounds, but it doesn't sound as dated as most all other 80s stuff of this period because they just did it so well. And it's a bit controversial, which is why it's on this list among the Yes faithful who like their earlier stuff. Tales from Topographic Oceans is a highlight for me of that early period. But even the debut, the Yes album, all great, 70s prog. But then they adapted to 80s so much better than all the other prog guys. I mean, lots of other prog bands did not. Starcastle disappeared. Nobody had an appetite for that sound anymore. But these guys changed it. They kept experimenting. They kept looking forward, which is what prog was all about. It's progressive. And they did it extremely well. And I can't stand when Yes people who are fans of the Genesis, Starcastle, Yes, Gentle Giant, Crimson, they're like, oh yeah, this was when we tuned out. And I'm just like, man, you're missing out then because this is a fantastic album.
All right. And then my final one is Blind Melon Soup from 1995.
Hell
I
yeah.
had first heard of this record on a list, much like this one of the most underrated albums of the 1990s. And this was number one, and when I first saw it, I was like, oh, Blind Melon, that shitty No Rain band. And there's so much more than that. It's unfortunate that they get tagged with that because Soup, this was released about 2 months before the death of their lead singer, Shannon Hoon. This album is front to back excellent from the beginning with Galaxy, which is about a car or was named after a car, to the near end with the ending with Mouthful of Cavities and Lemonade. And in the middle, you have this weird serial killer tale and Skinned, which is about like Ed Gein. Like there are so many odd elements to this, and it's definitely 90s alt. It's hardcore 90s alt, but it's very relaxing to listen to. And the instrumentation on it is really damn good, especially for the time where everything was so stripped down. These guys need to get more play and need to get more love. And this is the album you go to realize there's so much more than the goddamn B Girl and No Rain. Okay.
Look, I like No Rain, but I'm with you. These guys are underrated as a band, just for the cool shit that they were doing before tragically Shannon Hoon died way too soon and we didn't get to see any more from them. But man, that's a great pick, man. I honestly, I didn't think of Blind Melon, but that would have easily made my list as well. These guys.
Oh, it was fantastic. The first one I wrote down.
Yeah. And I guess that'll do it. That's our top five. I guess really in no particular order because we could go on like this for a long time. Evangelize records we think are underrated. But the companion video for this that we're about to do is going to be the exact opposite. So stay tuned for that. The overrated albums that we think of getting way too much attention. So thanks for watching, Mike. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.